Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. We've got the Procurement Act, key processes and terms explained with myself, Andrew Watson. I'm the Bid Training and Consultancy Manager here at Proactis, dealing with all things to help our suppliers be as successful as possible in screening up public sector contracts. My good colleague, Alistair.
Hi everybody, I'm Alistair O'Donnell, bid manager within Andrew's training and consultancy team.
Thanks, Alistair. So we're going to be going over the next. We've got an hour booked in, folks, and we'll be going over some bits and pieces to try and give you some guidance around that. We did do one of these before. We did a kind of one in November when there were still details emerging, and this is part two, part two. Alistair, we're like bad boys part two, part four. What are they on? I'm not sure. Anyway, the idea is we're going to be kind of a little bit building on some of the stuff that we talked about, which is maybe a little bit more high level. What we want to do today is really talk about some of the things you're going to be faced with on the ground in reality when you're working on actually putting responses together, some of the things to watch out for, and to also provide a little bit of reassurance about things. I don't think anyone should be super stressed about this. I think it should be a good change, and we'll run through some things. Hopefully, provide some information, provide some guidance to some more information, and give you a bit of reassurance you're feeling more confident about what to expect come next Monday. 1 week away, guys. It's been a long time in the offing. It's been a big focus. Anyway, let's couple of little things, folks. In the chat function, we would encourage you to put any questions or comments as you need. What if it's working properly? What you'll also see is I've put in a preloaded just value. We've preloaded some hyperlinks, and we'll kind of draw attention to those at the appropriate points as we're going through the webinar. But just some hyperlinks there that are providing some additional resources, additional information for you to come back to. And of course, we always make the webinars available as a recording after the fact. Don't worry, we got your back. It's quite information dense, this one, because we're trying to provide that good level of information. So you might want to watch it back, maybe with the cameras blocked off, just so you don't have to look at our faces. But anyway, hopefully we'll provide value, and you can carry on with it. Anyway, that's probably more than enough rambling for me as a starter for 10. Alistair, what are we talking about? Let's go up a level to start with.
Yeah, so it's a continuation of a theme. As you've said, this is part two. So we're looking at, the Procurement Act 2023 and its ambitions to raise standards throughout the industry and facilitate SME involvement in simpler, more flexible and accessible UK public procurement exercises. There are also more protections for suppliers in general, but specifically weighted towards SMEs and VCSEs, that's voluntary, charitable, and social enterprises, to again better facilitate their involvement in public procurement. Now, these protections come with some obligations, a bit of a pass it on theme, where you as suppliers or we as suppliers are expected to cascade these new protections throughout our supply chains and subcontractor networks. So we'll touch on these things in detail, but we're looking at things like prompt payment, payment of the living wage, training and development opportunities. So we'll discuss these concepts as we go, but I think Andrew's going to kick us off with the new central digital platform.
I am, Alistair. But don't jump the gun, just to set the
Oh,
agenda a little bit
too
more.
fast.
Goodness me, you're an eager beaver today. Okay, so I will start with the central digital platform. I'll try and go into a little bit of detail without kind of boring people to death and without it being kind of too much. But we will talk about that. We think that's probably the one thing that's going to feel like the biggest change that's being kind of being brought about, and it is something that you definitely will have to sort of engage with and use. So we'll talk a little bit about that just to put people's minds at ease and kind of give you our take on it as well. So we'll start with that. It feels like a big one. We'll delve into this sort of the evolution around buyer objectives, what some of these things are designed to do, some of the changes are designed to do, and as Alistair's talked about, actually what some of the duties upon buyers are going to be. There's big themes here around, feedback and transparency and how this new way of working or the changes that are being brought about support that. Okay. Again, what are you going to be faced with on the ground? There are new procurement routes, some things like that that are put into place, and we'll just talk a little bit about those just to make sure you're going to be comfortable with them when you see them in this kind of new world. And we'll talk a little bit about the piece around the debarment because that is a bit of a big change, but hopefully it's more for information rather than anyone on the call would ever find themselves in that situation. And we'll do a little bit of a wrap up as well in terms of final thoughts, what's some next actions, again, recap on the resources that are available, and really kind of hopefully provide some reassurance that there is a change that's coming, but it shouldn't be monumental in terms of how we're working. It should be a change for good that will continue to kind of improve over time. Okay, so that's the agenda piece. I'm going to dive in to the central digital platform. As I did say, folks, we do have the chat function available. I've put in those comments regarding are those hyperlinks that we'll flag to as we're going on. But do feel free if you do want to punch anything into the chat. We'll either try and pick them up at the end of the webinar based on timing, or we'll try and do it kind of as a follow-up piece for you folks. Okay. So one of the big areas we're getting asked a lot of questions around about is the central digital platform. So the first thing to say is don't panic about this coming into force and about thinking, okay, well, what if I'm not registered yet? Am I going to be excluded from opportunities and all that type of stuff? So I say don't panic about it. It's coming in. It's going to be live and active from Monday of next week. So let's be clear. What is it? So the central digital platform is a kind of expanded or enhanced version of FTS, so Find a Tender Service, the government platform that existed. So Find a Tender Service was about being able to search for and look for specific opportunities and have a profile and get alerts and so on. The central digital platform will continue to do that, but low value tenders from Contracts Finder will also now be incorporated with that, and you'll be able to search through all of those in one place. And there's also going to be an aspect of it called the Supplier Information Service, where you are going to have to input your headline. I'm calling it, I'm terming it as your headline company information that you've got to capture in the central digital platform to be able to put in tenders into the future beyond next Monday. You will have to have this headline information captured in the central digital platform. Just drawing your attention to a couple of links. We've got a link to our blog, a news article on the central digital platform, just to give you a bit some more information in an easy to digest way. And again, we've actually put a link to the government commercial function YouTube channel, which actually does some screen walkthroughs for the central digital platform. So that's a useful resource for you to look at as well. In terms of the information that you're completing on the central digital platform, it is that headline information. So you can see the right hand box, like what type of information is actually being captured there. Very basic information about name, address, admin, company's house, etc., VAT numbers, relevant qualifications. You're going to be asked to upload your most recent financial accounts. You're going to be asked about connected persons, so specifically within Central Digital Platform, who are the persons of significant control, and you'll be asked a number of yes/no questions regarding discretion or mandatory exclusions. Those of you who are already actively bidding just now will recognise this as the information from the very first sections of a standard selection questionnaire. Okay, selection questionnaire. So what we're doing is we're saying that government are wanting to capture that headline information on the central digital platform, and then through one of two ways, what will happen is that information will get pulled across into whichever portal is hosting the actual procurement opportunity you're interested in pursuing. So again, if you've got some familiarity, you'll know there are a name of companies who provide, a number of companies who provide portals that authorities can use to publish and run their procurements through. Proactus has a number of products that do that. ProContract, Source to Contract, as do other providers as well, such as Intend or Delta. So there's a number of these companies. So this part of the procurement process, where you're accessing opportunity, downloading documents, expressing interest, downloading documents, and responding to a tender opportunity will still happen on a number of portals. But on each of them, the headline information that we've talked about that's captured in the central digital platform will be pulled into the portal specific to the opportunity that you're wanting to respond to. It can get pulled into the portal, and you'll see this in the coming weeks as you bid for things in two different ways. One way is you actually have to download that information from the central digital platform and then upload it into the portal against the opportunity that you're working on responding to. Or through the central digital platform, you get access to a unique key which you enter into the portal for the opportunity you're responding to, and it pulls that information via API through into that portal. Okay. Central Digital Platform is also going to issue you with a specific, a unique identifier, which is going to be called a Public Procurement Organization Number, or PPON for short, which is basically like a sort of passport, a stamp for an organization. It's going to mean that the government are able to understand exactly what any company is, to see that it's a unique record, and to tie that back with information that's centrally held. So in terms of having control and consistency across the information, that's going to be help governments to identify it's a specific company. This is where they're interacting with the system because they've got that one, their unique identifier, that PPON code. Okay. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense in terms of how it's going to work. What does it mean for you as a supplier? Well, you've got to go in and complete that information, that headline information, and then you've got to make sure that you pull it into whichever portal you're working in for a submission. It means if any of that information changes, that you've got to make sure it's up to date as you would. But it also means that for that headline information, you're only going to complete that once, tell me once, but really tell me once until it changes and then tell me again. Okay. But it means across every tender submission, you're not having to repeat entering that headline information. So it will save a little bit of time for suppliers to not have to re-enter that. But let's be clear, the proportion of a tender response, the time to put a tender response together, that this information constitutes, is a very small percentage. It's less than 5% of the overall effort that's going to be involved. Okay, you're still going to have the rest of the selection questionnaire to complete, for example, contract examples, references. You're going to have the actual tender itself to complete, uploading your quality responses and your commercial response. So all of that stuff you're still going to be doing on a tender by tender basis, but this sort of fragment of the information required is going to be pulled across without you having to redo that every single time. Okay, so it will make it easier, but it's not going to make a drastic impact on how long it's going to take you to complete an individual tender, which sometimes I feel like there's information floating about like it's going to make it so much easier to tender. The reality is it's not, because it's only capturing less than 5% of the work to stop you having to repeat that. So there's obviously a big limit in terms of how much it can impact. Folks, the other thing just to touch on regarding the central digital platform is, well, what does it do and what does it not do? So one of the reasons, or one of the issues with um, Contracts Finder and Find a Tender was about the adherence of authorities pushing notices and making sure that they got there so that you could then search for them to find all of the relevant contract opportunities. There are a really high number, there's several hundred Tenders Direct subscribers on this call, they'll know already. If you only rely on the platform, unless something materially changes, there will still be lots of low value tender notices that don't make it onto the central digital platform as they didn't onto Contracts Finder. The other issue is that the categorization function itself is not ideal working off CSV codes, so things can get missed because you don't see them, and you can get a lot of false positives as well, both of which are reasons for to be exhaustive, comprehensive, and for good categorization are reasons why, although the central digital platform is coming in, you would still, for maximum efficiency and to see the whole of market opportunities, you still would want a service that's able to categorize and show you all of the public sector opportunities that exist across the market, i.e. a system like Tenders Direct. And in honesty, there are, maybe one or two other high quality providers of that similar service. So you will see stuff on the government's website saying there's no need to pay for opportunities, which is partially true, but is a little bit of an incomplete statement. I just do want to kind of draw attention of for fullness and correctness. And happy to provide any information that I'm talking about in terms of we do run the analysis, and lots of opportunities at the moment don't make it onto the government platforms that should do to give you visibility. Hence why people have still got a great need for a system that can do that and do that advanced categorization for you. Okay, enough of the contrarian piece. I'll move on and let Alistair talk about the stuff around buyer objectives.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So I want to talk just a little bit about a legislated shift in objectives for contracting authorities. So the evolution, as we've called it, of buyer objectives, as I believe that these represent significant progress that's been brought in by the Act. So authorities have a new legislated focus on delivering value for money, maximising public benefit, and acting with and being seen to act with integrity. So to my mind, these can be fairly abstract concepts. So I thought it would be worth offering some analysis as to what these mean and how they can be achieved throughout your general business practices and certainly into your future tender returns. So we have in this vein the introduction of the National Procurement Policy Statement, which seeks to allow the government to set up and communicate policy objectives to which it expects public procurement to contribute. Now, this helps suppliers and buyers align with key UK-wide overarching objectives, promoting a joined-up approach to these deliverables and certainly allowing more consistency and predictability in deliverables resulting from public sector procurement. It should take a lot of the guesswork out of our tender returns as suppliers. So there is a guidance note released which provides the following definition. The National Procurement Policy Statement is a statutory statement which allows the government to set and communicate the wider policy objectives to which it expects public procurement to contribute. So as we've just said. This might include, for example, objectives to increase skills or jobs in a certain industry or area, or to align with the pledge to achieve net zero by 2050. In 2021-22, public procurement made up about a third of public sector spending. It can therefore have a large impact on the achievement of these wider objectives. I think that the current stats for spend under public procurement per the government commercial function are sitting at around £385 billion annually, so it's not insignificant. Now, a brief look at the National Procurement Policy Statement ambitions. We've got some of these on the slide here, and we've dropped a PDF of the statement into the chat. So we will look at kickstarting economic growth and strengthening supply chains. So particularly giving fair opportunity to SMEs and VCSEs, whilst creating high quality jobs that offer fair wages, good working conditions, and which champion innovation. Now, it's not just contracting authorities who need to further these aims. This is an area where the pass it on analysis that we've mentioned previously comes into play, of us as suppliers cascading these opportunities and protections throughout our own supply chains. Preferences are now equally held over suppliers in this regard, as well as public buyers. We see a second point of making Britain a clean energy superpower through accelerating net zero initiatives, minimising waste, and supporting the use of green technologies, amongst a lot more. Do have a read of the statement. So again, if there are areas within your business where you can exploit this, do so. A third one we've got is breaking down barriers to opportunity, which I think talks to the maximising public benefit obligation. And this can be achieved through, again, addressing specific skills gaps and facilitating access to training and other development opportunities, and further by removing barriers to entry for young people and underrepresented demographics, including people with protected characteristics and care levers. Now, this is verbatim from the policy statement. So if you have opportunities and ability to deliver these measures, you will be looked upon favourably by contracting authorities. There are two more of taking back our streets through crime reduction and building an NHS fit for the future. And generally, the procurement policy statement came out on the 13th of February, so it's still quite fresh. But certainly my analysis of particularly these last 2 points is that these will be achieved through preventative measures. So, including reducing crime and supporting good physical and mental health by providing high quality jobs and encouraging suppliers to recruit from economically inactive cohorts. So the idea here is that by providing gainful employment at a fair wage will help reduce poverty and the health inequalities that typically accompany poverty. We may help reduce mental illness and thus reduce over-reliance on our public services. Now, I'm in no way qualified to talk about mental illness causes, the reduction of them. I am just trying to find that analysis of the National Procurement Policy Statement. So rather than just pumping money into the NHS, for example, they're looking to remove the circumstances that cause people to lean on the NHS. And a big part of this is gainful employment opportunities that promote better physical and mental health outcomes. We're still at the very early stages of this, so do forgive me if your analysis is different to mine. But I think what we're looking at here is how public spend can support these big picture initiatives and prevent or reduce the circumstances that give rise to crime or health inequalities, for example. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about the broader ambitions of the new Procurement Act. So we'll circle back to the three original aims of promoting value for money, maximising public benefit and operating with increased transparency. Now, the procurement policy statement provided good context to this, but let's get under the skin of these a little bit. So value for money. We'll see in the evaluation of public sector procurement opportunities, there is a move, this is one of the most widely advertised changes, is there's a move from the most economically advantageous tender to the most advantageous tender. So this opens the door for consideration and evaluation of wider social benefits, social value, and we see there's an onus being placed on innovation, whole life costs by way of increased quality, non-financial benefits, including upskilled and empowered local workers who receive ongoing training and development, are paid a living wage, and aren't on zero-hour contracts. And this is all underpinned by accredited, experienced, and competent suppliers. So we see here the direction that certainly our social value offerings, but also our general business practices could take to allow us to operate in compliance with the national procurement policy objectives. Now, these initiatives may well involve additional costs to your business, okay? The creation of roles at living wage isn't cheap, neither are carbon reduction plans nor formally accredited systems of work. However, the emerging theme is that buyers are willing to pay more if they receive safer systems of work, more community benefits or social value, integrated staff training, continuous professional development with staff paid a living wage. This represents better value in the long run and for more involved stakeholders, including members of the local community, local supply chains, and employees. It also, as we've said, seeks to reduce dependency on public services such as the NHS. So this is the direction that UK public sector procurement is taking. We're notifying you of these changes so you can perhaps get ahead of this curve in your future bid writing and align more closely with known client and government priorities. Now, I often talk when I'm giving advice in my role or write about going a little bit further than stating, here's what we can do in our tender response documents. And I think it's worth developing our themes into, here's what we can do for you as a client. We now know what the government and contracting authorities say they want, so we can tie in our deliverables to meet these expectations. So to the point of maximising public benefit, we've discussed this by reference to the National Procurement Policy Statement. Again, not to just repeat myself, but buyers understand that quality costs more, but it can often represent better value. They know that accreditations and training don't just appear out of the ether, and they know that they aren't free. Someone, i.e. you as a business owner, is paying for them, and your staff are also having non-productive work days removed from their core duties to complete training and development courses. Now, if buyers want to mandate accreditations and staff development, there is now an understanding that these are costs borne by companies which will invariably, in part or in full, be passed on to clients like them. That's business, and by and large, most public sector buying authorities understand this. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. There are options to pursue these national procurement policy objectives without perhaps grossly increasing your costs. Recruitment, to my mind, may represent one of these. Shifting your focus to underrepresented demographics, young people, care leavers, etc., doesn't need to result in higher recruitment costs. And again, if you're delivering training and staff development anyway, you would continue with these measures for newly recruited cohorts. Again, providing gainful supply chain opportunities for local SMEs or VCSEs doesn't need to result in increased costs. And often by favouring local companies, you may achieve cost and carbon savings in the event of logistics, transport, commuting costs. There are ways to work smarter, not harder, and repackage initiatives that you're already delivering. So a good example here would be if you already hold yourself to 30-day supplier payment terms, there's no change required. Simply collate these stats. We need to get better as an industry in collating these stats so we can demonstrate them as evidence in future bid writing. But gather a percentage of invoices paid within 30 days, invoices paid within 60 days, and you're set. So these initiatives don't automatically add costs to your business, or not all of them, certainly. So this shift that we see allows for broader consideration of factors beyond price. This is buyers are having a broader consideration of factors beyond price, including quality, innovation, and environmental impact, as we've discussed. This aligns with the requirement under the Act to consider national priority outcomes as defined in policy statements. So the National Procurement Policy Statement being one of these. So we'll spin on, we'll have a little look at transparency notices and feedback. And the idea here is that suppliers are being offered additional protections and visibility by contracting authorities delivering transparency by default. Now, as somebody who's worked in the industry on a supplier basis, this is a pain point. It's a real pain point, and it's quite refreshing to see that it's being actioned and it has been considered. So the Act introduces several new notice requirements at each stage of an opportunity's life cycle. This is with a view to increasing transparency before, during, and after tendering exercises. The aim, as we can see on the screen, is to reduce the need for ad hoc supplier inquiries by providing visibility and high quality, up-to-date information on procurement exercises and contracts. Now, there will be a noticeable shift that notices are required throughout the full procurement and contract life cycle instead of just the procurement process. Now, this is quite an important development. This attests to the inclusion of the whole contract lifecycle and contract management activities now forming a core element of procurement as we know it. Procurement no longer ends on contract award. We see here with the introduction of mandatory KPIs and contracts over £5 million, contract management and key performance indicators and measures of success is now being brought into this umbrella term of procurement. So it's quite a big development in the new legislation. Now, if we skip on, I'll do a really brief piece on the new notices. I'll deal with the top four and then the assessment summary. And Andrew, at a later stage in the piece, has some information on contract award notices and contract details notices. But these are some good changes. They positively impact all suppliers, but they disproportionately positively impact smaller suppliers. So a pipeline notice, the analysis of this is it is deemed as being of particular benefit to small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, and voluntary community and social enterprises, VCSEs, as it provides them with time to plan for future work. So you've normally, if you're an SME, VCSE, you may have constrained resource. So you've got more time to plan for this. Now, this ensures a competitive and diverse market, so it's of benefits to buyers as well. This is a good thing. An early look at upcoming tenders to provide time to prepare. Brilliant. Secondly, planned procurement notices. The planned procurement notice is an optional notice. It's similar to a pipeline notice in that it provides advance notice of an upcoming procurement. It does, however, go further than a pipeline notice and is designed to give as much advanced information to the market as possible to again enable potentially interested suppliers to determine if this is something that they wish to bid for. It also provides maximum time for preparation. Now, a key point here is this is the only type of notice that, when used correctly, can result in a reduction in the minimum time periods. So keep an eye on these and just become familiar with them. Preliminary market engagement notices. I've been practicing that. This notice is used to invite suppliers to participate in preliminary market engagement or to notify the market that engagement is taking place. This is deemed to help ensure a level playing field and also serve to attract new entrants. So again, disproportionately positively impacting SMEs. Transparency notice, again, I'll skip through this. I'm aware we're halfway through our time, but under the new Act, contracting authorities will be required to publish a transparency notice before awarding a contract or framework agreement as a direct award, so an award without a competitive tender process. Now, these have existed for years, but contracting authorities have up until now published these on an entirely voluntary basis, so that changes. Benefits of this is that it allows contracting authorities to be held accountable for the non-competitive contracts they sign with the private sector. So again, raising standards for everybody. And finally, an assessment summary. The aim of the assessment summary is to ensure that a supplier who submitted an assessed tender in relation to a competitive tendering procedure understands why their tender was either successful or unsuccessful. It also allows unsuccessful suppliers to see how the contracting authority determined the most advantageous tender in accordance with the award criteria. Now, the regulations, the new Act sets out what type of information needs to be included in an assessment summary in a way that aims to provide a level of consistency across procurement opportunities, regardless of who the contracting authority is, what the contract is for, or any variations in approach to award criteria and assessment methodology. A quick note on this, your tender must have made it through to the formal assessment stage, okay? So if you're perhaps unsuccessful in a PQQ, for example, you aren't owed this summary. It's only if your tender was compliant and formally assessed at the final stage. And as I've said, Andrew's got a little bit more information um, on contract award notices and contract detail notices. I'll finish up this segment by talking a little bit on feedback obligations. This is an area of real importance and excitement for us as
Alistair,
suppliers. Yes.
sorry, I was just going to say I might have missed it, but it was just a flag. I did have a little bit of an issue, a bit of a technical snag with the links, but we've now sorted that so everyone can see them in the chat. I reposted them. I was trying to be too clever by doing it in advance. And just to say, there is a link to that blog specifically that talks in a little bit of a high level summary I get across all those different notice types, so people can refer to that one as well. Sorry, on you go.
Yeah, of course. No, good. That's fine. That'll take you to the Knowledge Hub as well, which has got quite expansive information, free information. So feedback, yeah, good news, really good news for suppliers. You can see on the screen, contracting authorities must now provide all bidding organisations that have been assessed with feedback in the new assessment summary format. This drives transparency and will aid industry betterment, a lot of buzzwords there, by enabling suppliers to improve bids. So to my mind, and this is a pain point that has been dealt with, suppliers regularly, I know that we do because I write for them, regularly demonstrate continuous improvement by way of feedback loops and project debriefs. It's a core tenet of ISO 9001, which I write about weekly. It's really refreshing to see now that contracting authorities will start playing their part in enabling better bidding outcomes by providing feedback. It's a foundation of continuous improvement. And up until now, it's been like trying to get blood out of a stone. It's trying to get feedback from some contracting authorities, not all. Some are excellent. What I'll do now, I'll pause for breath. I'll hand back over to Andrew for some detail on the new procurement routes available to buyers.
Just just wanted to say I've been looking at the question, trying to do my multitasking thing, which is super dangerous, folks. But I've been trying to look at some of the questions that have been coming in, and there are literally hundreds of questions, so we won't be able to get through them all. But there's quite a few questions saying there's conflicting information out there about whether or not you can register on the CDP just now. You cannot. It's only available to register as a supplier on it from it's literally midnight, isn't it, Alistair? Like one
It's
minute
one
past
minute
midnight.
past midnight. As a
1 minute.
supplier, yeah.
Well, poised. As a supply, okay, so it's 1 minute past midnight. So you're not going to be able to do that registration that I ran through at the minute, but you will be able to do it from 1 minute past midnight on the 24th. The other thing, just again, there's been quite a lot of questions on it. I think they were coming in as I was doing the explainer bit, but just for clarity, you're never going to complete a full tender submission process on the central digital platform. You're only inputting that headline information. It's always going to then be another portal, be it a practice one, be it one of our competitors one, which is hosting the opportunity where you're going to complete the remainder of the information and pull your headline information from the CDP. So the CDP is not somewhere where you're going to express interest in an opportunity and complete that opportunity from start to finish. The ecosystem of procurement portals to actually upload your responses to submit your responses, to find the tender documents, that ecosystem is unchanged, okay, guys? So that all is remaining the same. So whichever portals you've been working in to do your tender responses up to now, that bit's going to stay unchanged, okay? It's just this linkage into the CDP that's the change. A lot of folk were asking about the address for it. You can just Google it and it will come up straight away. As long as it's the Gov one, it will be really clear. And like I say, it's an enhanced version of Find a Tender, so you'll see it there, and it'll prompt you to set up a new registration bit for that supplier information service part of it. Okay, so it should be really easy to find. If I can do it without interrupting the stream, I'll try and drop that in the chat as well in terms of the actual link. But it's really easy to find if you just Google use whichever search engine you have, you'll be able to find it. Okay. Um, Wanting to just focus a little bit on new procurement routes. So just to understand, like, some of the changes of the things that you will actually be faced with when you're, responding to opportunities. So we've talked about, the CDP and how that's a real tangible difference. What are the other things that you're going to see from any tenders? So the idea is it's like a hard cut over, folks. So any existing tender processes, contracts, etc., are gonna that are before pre 24th of Feb are gonna kind of they will be concluded under the old scheme. But anything that's launched new from the 24th will be this kind of new world. Okay, so it's from next week you're going to start to see changes to things like procurement procedures. Okay, if we were all doing this live and I had like prizes, I could throw them out into the crowd. There are currently, as of this, as it still stands just now this week, there are 7 different procedures that can be used. Prize would be for anyone that can name them all without looking them up, which is an excellent achievement. You'll be a really high level of public sector procurement knowledge if you do. At the moment, we have open procedures, we have restricted, competitive dialogue, competitive procedure with negotiation, innovative partnership, negotiated procedure without prior publication. Just now, those are going to get cut down to only being 2. You're going to have open procedures and you're going to have competitive flexible procedures. Competitive flexible procedure is a bit of a catch-all term, and it's basically giving some autonomy to authorities to best design the procurement for the things that they're looking to procure that is going to have the best outcomes. It's going to be the most fit for purpose. Okay. So the idea is that flexibility, this is all for above threshold, but it's about providing that flexibility in terms of the approach that the authority can take to make sure that procedure, that what they're running, how they're running it, is actually going to be exactly fit for purpose. So what does that mean? It means they can use various different tools from within their toolkit to try and make sure that they create a specific tender process that's going to be exactly fit for purpose for whatever it is they're looking to procure. And obviously that's going to be different for some goods and services than it is for other goods and services, dealing with different degrees of complexity in terms of the procurement. But the sort of things they can do are commercial dialogues, negotiation followed by best and final offer. You could incorporate site visits, supplier presentations, product demonstrations, e-auctions, variant tenders even. Okay, so there's lots of different things you can do, um, and it's around about sort of giving more control, more autonomy to reach better outcomes, to do a little bit around innovation as well. I talked there about variant tenders. Alistair, you had a recent example, didn't you, that you were working on regarding variant tenders?
Yeah, I think variant tenders are they're so important and they're underutilized. We see central government sources, in public screaming out for innovation, but you then see contracting authorities releasing tender packs that say variant tenders will not be considered, you'll be deemed non-compliant, and all these things will happen to you. So there's a disconnect in the messaging. It's now cascading through, and we are seeing a bit more of a look for variant tenders. Variant tenders, to my mind, means efficiencies and innovation. And I'm working with a company at the moment who deal with aerated concrete remediation, and these guys have really, really gone in on their research and development. They're working with government advisors on the topic, and they've got a novel, patented, innovative solution. And the tenders that we tend to be looking for, because it's rack affected concrete roof structures, a lot of public buildings, schools, NHS, they've got this novel solution. So we saw a tender that said variant tenders would be really welcomed, and we pounced on it and we won that work. So if you've got a novel, innovative, patented solution or something that you're doing a bit different, if you think that you could reduce a project program, drive efficiencies through by doing things a little bit different, you're now going to have a much better platform to bring these solutions to market. So variant tenders are really, really exciting for the future.
And the idea is that with more sort of thoughtful design of the procurement process that the authority wants to go through for any given opportunity, you might see more opportunities for these to emerge. There might be more individually kind of designed approaches. There's a piece there on the screen relating to preliminary market engagement, and the idea is that that actually potentially feeds into the actual design of the procurement exercise with those different tools that we talked about, based on what the market engagement could demonstrate or could probably hint them towards. Okay. A couple other things that I think is important to think about relating to procedural changes. The the minimum time standardly for procurement to be open for is 25 days instead of 35 as it is just now. And there will be occasions when it can be as low as 10. Okay, so not to say that they always will put it as the minimum number of days, but that standard minimum has dropped from 35 to 25, which I'm sure will probably not be music to your ears, unfortunately, folks. Just a minor point, but I know there will be some folk who have different company structures in terms of where they're based, not necessarily always in the UK, but under the new system, it is possible for if it's a non-UK supplier, they do have the option to disregard their tender just on that basis. Okay, so that is kind of explicitly there, not that they will, but that they may. Okay, so if you're working in a non-UK organisation and you're looking to bid in, you can ask that clarification if it's not captured within the documents. Okay, within that specific opportunity. The bit, just to sort of circle back slightly, the bit that I talked about relating to um, the different options they have in terms of designing procurement sort of pathways for an individual opportunity. The pathway that's going to be used, the tools they're going to use, whether it's like a negotiated one, whether it's open, whether it's actually just looks a bit like a kind of restricted procedure we'd have seen in the old world, that should be absolutely explicit. It should be explicit within the documentations. It should be really clear to you reading a tender pack how that procurement is going to be run, what the different stages are, what your obligations are. If there is any ambiguity in that, then you check it again, and also feel free to contact the authority and just to get that clarity. And there might be some bits to wrinkle, some wrinkles to iron out in the first few months. So there's absolutely no harm in doing that if you really don't feel like it's been, if there is ambiguity in terms of their explanation as well. Okay. Couple other different bits to draw your attention to in terms of some of the changes. The standstill period is now going to be 8 working days, okay, instead of 10 days as it was previous, and it's starting from a contract award notice, okay, which is saying who they are attempting or who they are planning to award the work to, um, and the contract value and some other details as well. But that contract award notice is what triggers the standstill period to commence. So that's the terminology. Contract award notice used to mean something slightly different in the old world, but this now it's the notice that actually triggers the start of the standstill period where people can object. So the idea is it's very visible who it's going to be awarded to, what they're going to be awarded, and that's the trigger. Contract award notices can only be issued after assessment summaries, which Alistair touched on, which is the feedback that both successful and unsuccessful buyers get. There's then a 30-day requirement after entering into a contract within 30 days to issue a contract details notice, which is more what we would used to have thought of as a contract award notice. So that's saying who won value of the contract, and actually for very high value ones over 5 million, it will actually have specific details of what is in the contract and what some of the actual KPIs that are going to be used to measure the contract. So a real big push on this idea of, Alistair's talked about already, this whole transparency piece as well. Okay. And just for funsies, folks, for contract values over 5 million, the names of unsuccessful suppliers will be included in the contract award notice as well, which is a new piece. So it's not for all contracts, but if you're pursuing big value contracts and you're unsuccessful, actually that does actually become go into the sort of public domain. Okay. So some changes there, but again, each individual opportunity you're working in, it should really be clear what it is that the requirements are there. But it should lead to more efficient, more properly thought out and designed procurements. Okay, it should be fun. In reality, the vast majority of them are still going to be open procedures, as you're used to the vast majority being now. But if you're into the realm of those competitive, flexible procedures, you'll see that there's different. You might see something. Oh, actually, they're structuring that, or the stages in that are a little bit different than I've seen before. Okay. A couple of things just to draw your attention to in terms of some of the other changes. One of the things just to talk about fairly briefly is around open frameworks. So we've got existing frameworks just now which are closed for their duration. We're going to have this concept of open frameworks, which is really a scheme of successive frameworks that can be published without material changes to the requirements to gain access to them. So the idea behind this is that it's going to mean the frameworks remain competitive with suppliers able to apply to them at different points during those term. And it's going to also, the way that they're structured, as I'll explain in a minute, is they will reduce the administrative burden involved in undertaking a full procurement, because actually some of the information carries over from one framework into the other. The way that they'll work is that a framework will be set up that you can apply to. It can either be a restricted, most of the time we anticipate it will be a restricted number of suppliers that would then gain access to it, and it must be reopened at least once for new suppliers within the first 3 years of its existence, and then it must be reopened at least once within any subsequent 5-year periods of its existence. It's going to have a maximum term of 8 years as long as there's at least 2 suppliers on it, or a maximum term of 4 years if there's only 1 supplier on it. Okay, but they have the flexibility about when they reopen it to suppliers. So if you imagine there's a situation where they feel some of the suppliers in the framework are no longer competitive, they can make a decision to reopen that framework to let other suppliers apply for that framework as well. The conditions for entry have to remain static throughout the duration of the frameworks. And the slightly funky part to this is that a supplier who's on the framework when the successive framework, say after 2 years comes around, they have a decision to make as to whether what they want to resubmit the exact same information they did when they first applied to the framework, or whether they want to update and change any of that information when that's assessed, to make sure whether or not they get access to the second or the third iteration of the framework. Okay. It should help keep things a bit fresher. It's going to have this increased sort of slightly more competitive element, and it should mean that it's easier to ensure that that good suppliers are retained, and that suppliers who are not performing can actually be sort of exited off because they wouldn't get on to the next iteration of it necessarily. Okay, so it's a little bit more reassurance that's able to ensure that contracting authorities are continuing to get this range, getting good outcomes, getting good value for money. We'll see how widely used they are, folks. But it's something to look out and be aware for. Again, when you see that terminology in open framework, all you're gonna know is that it's gonna open again within a 3-year window if it's new, but you don't know exactly when within that time it's gonna open. So you're again making decisions about whether or not you want to pursue it, etc., etc. Okay. And just very quickly, I'll talk a little bit about dynamic markets. So you've got dynamic markets which have been introduced, and they're going to be replacing DPS, dynamic purchasing systems. They're not radically different, folks. I don't think it's going to cause anyone sleepless nights in terms of the differences between them, but they are applicable. They should be more widely used. You should see them come up more often than you have done DPSs, because there's a wider range of procurements that they're now able to be assigned to. They can be assigned to not just goods and services, but also works. They can be done in more to work across more complex procurement requirements as well. And there's more flexibility about setting the conditions for entry. So again, a little bit more flexibility means that they might be more widely used. The fundamentals around them about being open for the full duration to suppliers, no caps on the number of suppliers, and new suppliers being able to join at any point are all going to remain from what we're used to from DPSs. Okay, so if you're seeing dynamic markets, that's a really good place to look for things, look for potential opportunities, and for people that are new to public sectoring, dynamic purchasing systems and their in the future dynamic markets can be really good entry points, because you can apply at any point. If there's any issues with your application, you'll get feedback on them and you can make any necessary adjustments and reapply in good time. One of the big changes that you'll see dynamic markets from DPSs is that tender notices that for basically work packages for procurement requirements that are going through the dynamic market will actually be visible in public, so that those tender notices will be visible not just for people that are already signed up to the dynamic market and accepted onto it, but actually for anyone that's wanting to make a decision about what sort of work is actually flowing through that dynamic market. So you can see that in advance. You may have the opportunity to actually apply for the dynamic market in time to then apply for a specific opportunity, but I'm not sure that'll always work out. But it means you can do that research piece, understand what opportunities are flowing through that dynamic market, and then make an informed decision about whether you want to actually go for that application to join it. The suppliers that are going to be accepted onto it are going to be, again, public note, and there's a variety of notice forms around those. Conscious of time, so I will park it there. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight. Again, the resources on our Tenders Direct website are going to go into some of that stuff in a bit more detail, and I'll let Alistair very quickly spin through debarment.
Yes, thank you again, Andrew. This won't take long at all. It's a quick piece. So debarment it's a new feature under the new Procurement Act, and there is the introduction of the Procurement Review Service, with responsibility over three key functions, which I'll talk a little bit about. This is purely for visibility at this stage. I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole on an issue that really won't impact many of us. It's a short piece for visibility, but worth knowing, so that we can stay on the right side of compliance. So the new procurement review unit will provide oversight for suppliers. So these are good guys, okay? These are acting on our behalf. The Public Procurement Review Service is the first piece, are seeking to enhance the services offered to suppliers to maintain fairness within the public sector procurement landscape. Okay, brilliant. Secondly, the Procurement Compliance Service, PCS, will be reviewing contracting authority, so buyer compliance, to the new legislation and making recommendations to address repeated non-compliance. So a bit of buyer accountability, protecting us. And the Debarment Review Service, the DRS, are considering whether or not to conduct investigations into suppliers where their behaviours or circumstances mean that potentially they should not be allowed to participate in covered procurements or be awarded public contracts. Now, this also positively impacts us as suppliers because we'll get these bad actors removed, and then there's more opportunities for us who attain the minimum standards expected of us to to achieve success. So I'll spin through this. If you watch the government commercial function video, the YouTube one that we've linked, it's fab. I really can't express highly enough how good a quality it is. It's government, so they're neutral, and they're very, very competent, and this is their information, so go to the source. Andrew and I are providing a bit of commentary and analysis, but a lot of it is based on the government information, so always good to know. Probably one point just to get into is there's a piece on debarment there. You can maybe read that back, but I would say duties on suppliers is that suppliers can now be excluded based on connected parties, okay, and key subcontractors. Connected persons includes upstream relationships to the directors and shadow directors. This could even be parent companies and ultimate parent companies. So there's an action on us as suppliers to conduct due diligence in this area and ensure that these bad actors aren't connected to our business via parent companies. This will also apply downstream as we see its application within key subcontractor parties. Now, this again attests to the point that we should all be vetting and scrutinising our supply chains as we are directly responsible for them at every stage in a procurement exercise. So you're therefore encouraged to review your supply chains to ensure that no organisation poses unacceptable risk. Policies and procedures, for example, a subcontractor vetting questionnaire, should also be subject to a levelling up exercise to make sure the correct governance is in place. Again, this means the onus is on you to carry out due diligence and understand completely who's working with and for you in the capacity of a connected person under the new definition in the Procurement Act 2023. So that was a whistle stop tour. We can speak to you individually if you would like to email us, call us, get in touch, and we can go over this if you're worried. But it really shouldn't impact us. So final thoughts: don't panic about next Monday. Register when you can on the CDP and perhaps go into it with the relevant information handy. Understand your duty to keep information current and update core information when it changes. Again, as I've said, there is some major due diligence changes on us to know who's working for us in our supply chain, connected persons, to also stay aware of our performance through KPIs. This is the contract management piece that we spoke about, your prompt payment performance within your supplier network, which may need to be evidenced, and payment of the living wage, again, understanding that this will cascade down through your supply chain and subcontractor networks. These are all subject to the principles of pass it on, like we've said, because cascade these protections. I think another really low effort activity you could undertake that's going to yield a lot of results is read the National Procurement Policy Statement and align your strategy and responses to it insofar as is possible. But it's a really good source of information just to help us understand and interpret what buyer desires are, and consider how you can maximize the benefit from variant tenders. As we've said, my mind goes to innovation here, novel solutions, efficiencies. If you've been researching and developing a piece, you've got a platform now to be rewarded from it. We have introduced, as an extension of our Knowledge Hub online, a Procurement Act specific Knowledge Hub. So again, follow some of the links, get on our Knowledge Hub. It's all free, and you can filter down to the Procurement Act for some specific resources there.
Okay. I think that's about us then. I'm conscious of time. It was a little bit of a whistle stop tour. There's loads of questions. We will try and at some point in the future, maybe if we can even like categorize them and put some information out there. If there's something that you're really wanting to speak to us, are we're happy to carry on the conversation. It's great to. So those are the contact details for us. You can drop us a note on that bid support at tendersdirect.co.uk. We'll pick it up and we can organise to speak to anyone individually, have a bit of a catch up call, and just go through things in a little bit more detail. There's so many people on the webinar, and there are hundreds of questions. So it would obviously be good to try and support people a little bit more detail. If you want to, please do get in touch with us, and we'll be able to organise that. Again, the piece around the slides. So I noticed there were questions on that. So you will get sent a link to the recording as well, and you'll be able to watch that back in your own time. And as I said before, if you look in the eventually, as I got it sorted in the chat function, we've got those links for you to go and have a look in and do some extra research there. So hopefully everyone's feeling a little bit more comfortable with it. Nothing really to worry about. There's some changes, and what we'll do is we do monthly webinars, but we'll come back, when this has been live, maybe for 6 or 9 months, and we'll do another webinar in terms of like what impacts has it actually had, what changes to the landscape have we seen, and we'll do some aggregated analysis and bring that back to folks so we can kind of have a bit of an update and go, do we think it did what it was intended to, and what are the changes that we're seeing in terms of notices, notice types, notice numbers, all that type of good stuff as well. I hopefully that's been of use to folk. Hopefully everyone's happy with that. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. It's been a really big crowd. The IT has managed to stack up, which is never a given, so I'm happy about that as well. It's a real pleasure to lunchtime, and we hope to see you at the next webinar and more. So do get in touch if you need anything, and I really appreciate your time and attention. It's been a real pleasure, folks. So it's bye from me.
Yeah, and myself also. Thank you for your continued attention and interest, and we'll keep you up to date with the developments.
Thanks again, folks. Do get in touch if you want any more, but we'll say bye for now, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks again, folks.